I'm back with another video. Now, the World Series is over, and in just a few days, free agency is going to begin. To prep you guys for that, I aggregated 5 different free agency ranking lists to create my own top 25 MLB free agents for this offseason. For each player, I'm going to talk a little bit about how they performed this year, and then I'll get into where they may sign, potential teams, and then what the contract might look like. Now, I'm recording this Saturday morning, November 2nd, and free agency opens Monday, November 4th, late afternoon, I believe. I don't remember the exact time. I'm going to try and get this up Sunday, but there is going to be some stuff that I may miss if there's any surprising opt-ins, opt-outs. If anything happens today, Saturday, I'll come back, I'll record a little bit later and edit things in, but if there's anything Sunday or Monday that's surprising, I'm going to miss it here. Now, on another note, just before I get into this, there's 2 types of players I'm excluding from this list. One of them is players who have a club option. Now, there's only a few who would have made this list. It's Gerrit Cole, Marcell Ozuna, and Freddie Peralta, and they're all very likely to have their options picked up. Now, Cole is a little more of an interesting scenario because he's got a player opt-out, and if he opts out, the club can opt back in. They add an extra year to his contract. But again, that's fully expected to happen. He's going to opt out. The Yankees will opt back in. They'll give him an extra 5th year on what's remaining of his contract, and so he's not going to hit free agency. And same with Ozuna and Peralta. They're unlikely to hit free agency, so I'm not going to waste too much time on them. Now, I also excluded players from overseas leagues like Japan and Korea who would need to be posted, think like Yoshinobu Yamamoto or Shota Imanaga last year. And the reason for that is it's unclear who, if anybody's going to get posted. Now, one of them probably would have made this list. That's Roki Sasaki. He's a 22-year-old Japanese pitcher. But because we don't know if he's going to get posted or not, it's kind of up in the air this year. I'm not going to dive into him either. Now, with that out of the way, we're going to hop right in with number 1, Yankees outfielder Juan Soto. Soto's coming off arguably his best season in the majors, posting career highs with 41 homers and nearly 8 WAR. He made yet another All-Star game. He's probably going to finish 3rd in AL MVP voting. As for where he may land, Soto has said he's open to hearing from all 30 MLB teams, and basically every team's going to want him. But it's going to narrow pretty quickly. I think the field's going to narrow to 3, maybe 4 teams relatively quickly, just because he's going to command so much money, most teams won't be able to afford him. Now, those few teams that are going to be in on him, the Yankees and Mets are the obvious ones. They're the front runners. Fans of both teams have been clamoring for both teams to sign him all year, basically. I think the Giants will also be involved. You know, they've swung at big free agents before. They almost signed Aaron Judge. They almost signed Carlos Correa. They have the money to give the guy a sizable contract. Now, there's rumors of other teams involved. The Dodgers, the Blue Jays. Honestly, I don't think that they're going to really get involved. I think it'll come down to the Yankees and the Mets. Because at the end of the day, I think Soto's going to stay in New York. I think he's going to stay with the Yankees just because I think that they are more desperate than anybody to sign him. And I think they'll give him 14 years and about $700 million for about $50 million annually. Now at number 2, I've got Orioles starting pitcher Corbin Burns. Burns, like Soto, was traded last offseason with a year remaining on his deal, and he cemented himself as the top pitcher in this year's market. He made a 4th straight All-Star game, and he put up a 15-9 record and an ERA under 3. Now, like Soto, basically every team could use a Corbin Burns. Burns is 30 years old, meaning that he's probably going to get about 7 years. Teams tend not to like to commit to a starting pitcher who's that old for much longer than that. And so we're probably looking at a deal not too different from what Aaron Nola signed last offseason, where he got 7 years. Now, there's a handful of teams that are desperate for starting pitching. The Mets are probably chief among them, but there's the Red Sox, the Orioles, and a whole bunch of smaller market teams that are not going to be able to afford him. And as I have them whiffing on Soto, I've got the Mets signing Corbin Burns for 7 years and $245 million or $35 million annually. And number 3, I've got Giants starting pitcher Blake Snell. Now, despite winning the Cy Young last year with the Padres, Snell nearly reached opening day this year without a new contract. And now, after a season in which he dealt with injuries in the first half but rebounded with a phenomenal second half, even throwing a no-hitter, he's likely to opt out of the 2nd and final year of his $62 million contract with the Giants. And while I think he's going to get a longer deal than last season, he only got 2 years last season, the same issues still exist for him. His inefficiency, his lack of durability, his significant injury history, and he's now 32. And so I think all of that together is going to result in him getting no more than 3 or 4 years. Now, I think the Giants are still a likely landing spot, as once he settled in, he was really good for them. He basically gave them a second ace behind Logan Webb. The Mets, Red Sox, Orioles, and other teams are also possible destinations. But at the end of the day, I've got him going back to San Francisco. He worked really well there, and so I've got him on 3 years and $100 million, about $33.3 million annually. At number 4, I've got Astros third baseman Alex Bregman. Like most of his team, Bregman had a really slow start to 2024, and while he did improve throughout the year, he still ended with some of his worst numbers of his career. While the Astros have expressed interest in bringing him back, they're also a team that's let stars walk in free agency before. George Springer and Carlos Correa just in the last 4 or 5 years. So while there's a chance he comes back to Houston, I still think he's going to look elsewhere. And there's more than a few teams looking for a third baseman. The Yankees would probably love to move Jazz Chisholm back to second base where he's a little bit more comfortable, a little more experienced, and the Mariners, among other teams, are probably going to have interest as well. They're always looking for bats in the infield. I'm going to predict that Bregman gets the biggest offer from the team that needs him the most. It's probably the Mariners. And I'll predict he signs for 7 years and $200 million. About $28.5 million a year. At number 5, I've got Braves starter Max Fried. While Blake Snell has probably the highest ceiling of any lefty starters, Max Fried probably has the highest floor. Besides the shortened 2020 season and 2023 where he spent half the year injured, Fried's made 28 or more starts every season since he became a full-time major leaguer. And every year since 2020, his ERA has been 3.25 or lower. He's also shown a knack for going deep into games. He's got 6 career complete games, which for this day and age is quite a lot. Now, unlike most of the Braves' homegrown stars, Fried never signed a long team-friendly extension. Most of their guys do that, which is probably signaling that he's going to leave. And they do have the depth in their rotation to let him go. Now that Chris Sale's revitalized his career, you've got Strider coming back, you've got Reynaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach. They've got depth. They don't need to pay big bucks to Max Fried to keep him around. Now, a team I thought might be interested is the Texas Rangers, but there have been reports out of them that they're looking to cut payroll, not add it. And so he's probably not going to go there when he's going to command quite a big contract. I think the Giants may have interest. Even if they retain Snell, they do need extra depth at starting pitching. And the other top-line teams looking for starting pitching, the Mets, Orioles, Red Sox, I think they're all going to be in on him. Now, I'll predict that he signs with the Red Sox, which would reunite him with his friend and his high school teammate, Lucas Giolito. So I've got Fried to Boston, and I think the contract's going to be 6 years and $175 million, or about $27.5 million annually. At number 6, I've got Brewers shortstop Willie Adams. Over the last few off-seasons, many top shortstops have signed large free agent deals to leave the teams they were on. Corey Seager, Trey Turner, Carlos Correa, Javier Baez, Xander Bogaerts, Trevor Story, and Dansby Swanson. And Willie Adams is likely to join that group on a pretty sizable contract. In 2024, he set career highs with 32 homers and 112 RBI, and at just 29, he can probably get himself a 7-year contract. Now, while the Brewers would probably like to re-sign him, he's going to command more money than they can likely afford. And to me, the obvious fit is the Los Angeles Dodgers. There were trade rumors for a couple years that the Dodgers were interested in bringing in Adams to play short, and they've struggled to fill that position since Trey Turner left after 2022. They even moved Mookie Betts there for a short time this year. And on top of that, Dodgers president of baseball operations Andrew Friedman was the general manager of the Rays when they originally acquired Adams as an 18-year-old prospect. So all the ties are there, the need is there, the money is there. I think Adams is going to go to the Dodgers, and I'll say it's 7 years and about $180 million, or about $25.5 annually. At number 7, I've got Mets first baseman Pete Alonso. Alonso's 2024 was the worst regular season of his career. He put up career lows, not considering the shortened 2020 season, in homers with 34, RBI with 88, and WAR with 2.6. Now, he followed that up with some playoff heroics that probably won back the hearts of some Mets fans, and despite his struggles this year, he is still one of the best power bats in the game. Now, as for potential teams, the Cardinals are a team that I thought would be involved, especially Paul Goldschmidt is leaving, but they have hinted that they're scaling back payroll, and so I don't think it's really going to happen. Now, the Mets could bring him back, or the Yankees, the Astros, the Mariners. It's a handful of teams looking for a middle-of-the-order, power-hitting first baseman. Now, at one point during the year, Alonso probably wasn't looking at a huge long-term contract, but given the way he ended the season with the playoffs, he's probably going to get the 7 years that his age can really allow for. So I'll predict that Alonso's going to stay with the Mets. They're going to whiff on Soto. They're going to want that middle-of-the-order bat back in their lineup. And so I've got Alonso staying with the Mets. I've got him at 7 years and $200 million, which is about $28.5 million annually. At number 8, we've got Orioles outfielder Anthony Santander. Santander had maybe the quietest 40-homer, 100 RBI season of all time. He set career highs with 44 homers and 102 RBI. And while he's been very important to the Orioles over the years, they have plenty of young MLB-ready outfielders. And there's plenty of teams that could use a powerful switch-hitting corner outfielder. The Royals and Guardians are probably both going to have interest, but they tend not to swing as big as Santander in free agency. So I'll go with the Phillies as his landing spot. Johan Rojas didn't have a good year. They could look to move him to the bench, Brandon Marsh back to center field, which would open up left field for Santander. Now, as for the contract, I think George Springer's deal from a few years ago is a pretty solid comparison. He got 6 years and $150 million. Now, there are a few differences. Springer had a better track record, and he played center field, but Santander's a year younger, and he switch hits, and I think that kind of balances out. So I've got him to the Phillies, 6 years, $150 million, for $25 million annually. At number 9, I've got Dodgers starting pitcher Jack Flaherty. Flaherty was the best rental pitcher available at this year's deadline, and while he wasn't quite as good with the Dodgers as he was with the Tigers, he did still perform pretty well. And while he was inconsistent in the playoffs, he was lights out in Game 1 of the World Series, he was a disaster in Game 5 of the World Series, he should still be able to capitalize on a multi-year free agency contract. Now, I don't think he's likely to return to the Dodgers. I think they've got plenty of pitchers available. They're going to have guys coming back from injury, and I don't think they really need to commit the $20 million or more a year that it's going to take to keep him. I think they've got more pressing needs at shortstop particularly. They're going to sign Adames. I think that makes Flaherty look elsewhere. Now, while he is only 29, he's got a serious injury history, he's got issues with inconsistency throughout most of his career, and so I don't think teams are going to commit these 6 or 7 years like they would to Fried or to Corbin Burns. But I think the 3 or 4 year kind of tweener contract that lets him hit free agency again at 32 or 33 is totally possible, definitely something that I think he's going to get. And while a handful of teams are going to have interest, your top feeders, your Mets, Orioles, Red Sox, I think Flaherty is going to go back where he was comfortable. He's been on 4 teams in 2 years. He probably wants a little bit of stability. And the team where he's performed best of those 4 is the Detroit Tigers. So I've got Flaherty back to the Tigers, and I've got him signing for 3 years and $66 million, which is $22 million annually. At number 10, I've got Diamondbacks first baseman Christian Walker. Walker's one of the best first basemen in baseball, but because he didn't become an MLB regular until his late 20s, he's hitting free agency now for the first time at age 33. He's one of the summer's biggest all-star snubs, and he's probably going to win his 3rd Gold Glove award. Now, there's a handful of teams that are looking for first base help. Walker could stay with the Diamondbacks. They are a relatively competitive team, even though they missed the playoffs this year. And the Yankees, the Mariners, the Mets, the Astros could all be involved. Now, he could get a qualifying offer, the 1 year at about $21 million, which would complicate his market. But even if he does, I think contracts like the last couple of years, Anthony Rizzo, Jose Abreu, older first baseman hitting free agency, at the 2 or 3 years for a little under $20 million, I think it's definitely possible for him. Now, because he's got less wear and tear on him than those 2 guys, because he hasn't been a starter as long as those 2 guys, I think he gets a little bit of a bump from that. So I've got him signing with the Yankees, replacing Rizzo as their first baseman, and I've got him for 3 years and $60 million, which is $20 million annually. At number 11, I've got Dodgers outfielder Teoscar Hernandez. Teoscar turned down multi-year offers from a couple different teams last offseason in favor of a 1-year, $23.5 million deal with the Dodgers, which paid off immensely. He got to bat behind some of the best hitters in the history of the game, and he set a career high with 33 homers, and he nearly got to 100 RBI. Now, the Dodgers could bring him back, but as I've said, I think they've got more pressing needs at shortstop, so I think that big contract is going to go to Willie Adams, and Teoscar will probably look elsewhere. Now, there's a handful of teams looking for corner outfield help. The Royals, the Angels, the Guardians, the Nationals, and the Braves are all teams that could have interest. The Braves are the team I'm going to pick. They fit pretty nicely. They did just move Jorge Soler, who could play that corner outfield spot. They just traded him to the Angels, so it fills a need for them, opens up a need for the Braves, and Teoscar could fill that hole pretty nicely. Now, as for his contract, Teoscar's 32, so 3-ish years is probably about as long as he's going to get, and since he plays the field more, he should probably get a lot more than Jorge Soler's $42 million from last year. So I've got Teoscar to Atlanta for 3 years and $60 million for $20 million annually. At number 12, I've got Mets starting pitcher Shawn Manaea. Manaea is likely to opt out of the 2nd year of his Mets contract after putting up arguably the best full season of his career. He's had a career best with over 180 innings pitched, and he struck out 184 batters, which is the 2nd highest number of his career. The adjustments he made to his delivery in the middle of the season led to a phenomenal second half, and he continued that success into the playoffs. He's going to garner a lot of interest. Now, he'll turn 33 before next season starts, so he's probably not going to get more than 3 years on this new deal. And the Mets may give him a qualifying offer, but in either case, I think he's looking at a significant pay bump over the $13.5 million option that he's probably going to decline. Now, the Mets are probably going to be interested in bringing him back, as will the Orioles, the Red Sox, any other number of teams that need some starting pitching. There's a whole bunch of them. Now, of those teams, if we assume that Corbin Burns is leaving, Baltimore needs a starting pitcher the most. So I'll say that they're going to overpay for Manaea just a little bit to make sure that they get him. As for contract, I'll give him the same deal that Chris Bassett signed when he left the Mets. 3 years and $63 million, or $21 million annually. At number 13, I've got Cubs outfielder Cody Bellinger. Bellinger did not produce in 2024 the way he did in 2023. His numbers dropped below his career rates as he failed to break 20 homers and his batting average slid more than 40 points. But if he chooses to, he can test the market by opting out of the last 2 years of his contract. While he does play good defense at first and in the outfield, I don't think he forced a pay bump this year. I don't think he played well enough to get a raise over the contract that he currently has. And so while it is certainly possible, I think that Bellinger opts in, he stays at least 1 more year with the Cubs, and if he can rebuild that value in 2025, he can opt out again. He'll only be 30, so he could still get a significant long-term contract if he stays in 1 more year and is able to perform better. So I've got Bellinger opting back in with the Cubs. Hopping in from later in the day Saturday here, and yes, Cody Bellinger did choose not to opt out. He's staying with the Cubs. At number 14, we've got Guardians starting pitcher Shane Bieber. Bieber's 2024 ended really quickly after just 2 starts as he went down and needed Tommy John surgery. He's not expected back until next year's All-Star break at the earliest, and as such, it's tough to predict exactly what his contract is going to look like. While his career performance could land him a long-term deal, he may not get that offer this offseason because he's hurt, and so he may have to settle on a short 1 or 2 year deal with some incentives for how many innings he throws or something like that. Think like what Liam Hendricks and Tyler Mahle both signed last year while they were recovering from Tommy John. Bieber's got a better track record, so I think he'll get more than the $11 million that Mahle got last year from Texas. Now, Cleveland could certainly sign him, as could any number of teams who need a starting pitcher and maybe aren't that pressed to have him for the start of the year. The Texas Rangers have proven they do it, and they may get a guy for below market value to do it, which for a team that's kind of trying to cost control could be effective for them. The Padres are also going to be without Joe Musgrove for a while, and so bringing in Shane Bieber to kind of help stabilize their rotation with Dylan Cease, Michael King, could go a long way to help them. But at the end of the day, I think he'll stay where he's comfortable in Cleveland. Now, there is a chance that they give him a qualifying offer 1 year at a little over $21 million, and I think, given his injury, he might actually take it. You know, you don't see a lot of players accept the qualifying offer, but his situation is abnormal. I could see him accepting the qualifying offer. If Cleveland doesn't give him a qualifying offer, I've got him going back on a 2-year deal around $35 million, $17.5 a year. That's probably going to be backloaded. He'll make more the second year, or maybe there's an opt-out after 1. There'll be something interesting about that deal. It's not going to be a standard, you get the same salary each year. It's an interesting situation. It's different. So the contract will be different. At number 15, I've got Rangers starting pitcher Nathan Avaldi. Avaldi's expected to turn down his $20 million player option with the Rangers in search of a multi-year contract. He's been solid and pretty consistent in his 2 years in Texas, and he should have his fair share of suitors. Any team that needs a veteran starting pitcher a step below the Corbin Burns and Max Frieds of the world should be interested, such as the Padres, the Guardians, the Diamondbacks, Nationals, or even his current Rangers. Now, of those teams, I think he'll return to Texas, and I think he'll get a slight bump over the $20 million, and he'll get an extra guaranteed year. So I've got him getting 2 years and $44 million, and maybe there's a potential vesting option like his current contract had, where the third year could be added on at a higher salary, assuming he hits a certain number of innings in the first 2. At number 16, we've got Padres middle infielder Hassan Kim. Kim is coming off a shoulder injury that ended his 2024 early and may delay his start to 2025. We don't quite know yet. But he's still probably going to decline his $8 million mutual option. The injury might hurt his potential prospects, but he's still got value as a great defender at both shortstop and second base, and a league average bat. Now, he could return to the Padres, but they've got so many guys who can play shortstop, I think they're going to let him walk. The Brewers and Giants are the other teams that really have need for a shortstop, just given who's around, who's leaving, and I think that the Giants have the largest need. So I'll say that Hassan Kim goes to the Giants for a backloaded 2 years and $25 million. At number 17, I've got Astros starting pitcher Yusei Kikuchi. Kikuchi had a rough start to 2024, but the Astros gave up a sizable package to add him at the deadline, and it paid dividends. He proved to be really worth it. He put up the best ERA, FIP, and WHIP of his career across 10 starts for Houston down the stretch, which should bump up his next contract a bit. Now, he's 33, he may get a 3-year deal, but he's been inconsistent in the past. I think he's more likely to get 2 years than 3. Maybe there'll be a vesting option, a club option, something like that for a third year, but the kind of baseline of his contract, I think, will be 2 years. Now, the teams that are going to be interested in Kikuchi are going to be a similar list to those interested in Nathan Avaldi, but in addition, I think that the Astros are pretty likely to keep him, just given how good he was for them. So I've got Kikuchi returning to the Astros, and I think he gets a good chunk more than the $10 million he made this year. So I've got Kikuchi staying in Houston for 2 years and $30 million. At number 18, I've got Padres reliever Tanner Scott. Scott's the best reliever available in free agency this year, and he's coming off an amazing year split between Miami and San Diego, in which he was an all-star. He notched 22 saves, and he put up an ERA under 2. And while the Padres already have Robert Suarez and Jason Adam locked up for a couple more years, they may try to bring him back. But because he's the best relief arm on the market, he's going to draw interest from a whole bunch of teams. The Phillies and Yankees are two obviously very competitive teams, and both of their closers are hitting free agency. And other teams that are trying to compete, the Tigers, the Royals, the Orioles, they all need relief pitcher help. They could all be involved. I've got Scott signing with the Phillies to be their closer on a 4-year, $60 million deal for $15 million annually. At number 19, I've got Royals starting pitcher Michael Wacha. Wacha's coming off a third straight good season with a third different team. For the Royals this year, he made 29 starts, his most in a single season since 2017, and he put up a 3.35 ERA across 166 2/3 innings. And he can decline his $16 million player option for 2025 and test the market again. He's 33, so a long deal's kind of out of the question, but I think 3 years is definitely possible. And while the other mid-market teams are going to be interested, I think he sticks with the Royals. Wacha's been on a different team every year since 2019, and I think the stability is something he's probably going to look for. So I've got him signing back with the Royals for 3 years and $51 million, about $17 million annually. At number 20, I've got Yankees second baseman Gleyber Torres. Torres started his walk year absolutely terribly, but he improved throughout the season, and once he became the Yankees' leadoff batter towards the end of the year, he really took off. He put up an .859 OPS in 25 games in September. As such, it's going to be tough to figure out exactly what teams are actually going to use when negotiating with him. Right? He's a two-time All-Star with a career 112 OPS plus, but he's also not a good defender at short or second. Now, Torres made it clear earlier this year he wanted a long-term deal with the Yankees. He wanted to stay in the Bronx. But as it hasn't happened yet, I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's probably going to have to look elsewhere. The good news for Torres is he's the best second baseman on the market. There's really not that many players behind him. The bad news is not that many teams need second basemen. Two of the Yankees' rivals in the AL East, Boston and Toronto, both kind of have a hole there, but they're both sort of working through a rebuild, and I think that they're actually going to look internally, promote a prospect to try and take that second base spot, and so Torres doesn't really fit their plans. So the team I have him going to is the Seattle Mariners. I know I have them signing a third baseman already. I know I have them in on first baseman. Their infield's just kind of a mess other than J.P. Crawford at short. And while they have a club option for Jorge Polanco in 2025, I think they'll turn that down and look elsewhere for second base help. So I think Torres is a natural fit there. And I think rather than a one-year prove-it deal, I think the Mariners would actually be willing to commit to him for a few years. So I've got Torres signing with Seattle for 3 years and $40 million, about $13.3 million a year. At number 21, we've got Padres outfielder Jurickson Profar. Profar was one of the biggest breakout stars of 2024, making the All-Star game for the first time and posting career highs of 24 homers, 85 RBI, and a 134 OPS+. Now, he's 31, so he's not going to sign a huge long-term contract, and if I'm a team interested in Profar, I'm pretty nervous about signing him unless I'm the Padres. He didn't figure things out at the MLB level with two other teams before he got to San Diego, and his short stint with the Rockies in 2023 was an absolute disaster. It was so bad they cut him during the season. Now, that said, there's a handful of teams that are going to be involved, but at the end of the day, he's obviously most comfortable in San Diego. They have a hole in left field if they let him walk, so I think he's going to stay with the Padres. And I think he gets a sizable raise over the $1 million he just made this year, so I've got him getting 3 years and $45 million. At number 22, I've got Red Sox outfielder Tyler O'Neill. O'Neill had a massive year following his trade to Boston, hitting 31 homers and posting a 132 OPS+, which puts it as the second best season of his career. Now, while plenty of teams are looking for corner outfielders, O'Neill's only topped 100 games played twice in his career, and even this year he was injured a couple times. And that track record's going to hurt his market a bit. As such, I think he's going to return to the Red Sox. He played really well there, on a shorter-term deal, maybe with an opt-out. So I'll say he gets 2 years and $35 million, and he gets an opt-out so he can test the market again next season. At number 23, I've got Mets starting pitcher Luis Severino. Severino left the Yankees for the Mets last year after a few consecutive down seasons marred with injuries, and he had a solid comeback season. He made 31 starts, his most since 2018, with a league average ERA, and he continued that into the playoffs. Now, even though I have the Mets adding Corbin Burns, they're still losing Shawn Manaea, they're probably also losing Jose Quintana, and so I think they're going to retain Severino. I think they need the extra starting pitching depth. And I'll say he gets the same deal that Nathan Avaldi got with Texas 2 years ago. So I've got him at 2 years, $34 million, and a third year at a higher salary that vests if Severino is healthy and throws enough innings. At number 24, I've got Dodgers starting pitcher Walker Buehler. Buehler's in a very similar situation to Severino last year, or Frankie Montas last year. He's a pitcher who's shown amazing potential in the past, but he's got a long injury history, and his walk year performance was downright terrible. Now, the positive for Buehler is that he performed really well in the postseason, so the thing that's fresh in teams' minds is his most recent playoff performance. That said, because of his last couple years, I think the Severino, Montas, Jack Flaherty from last year, I think it's a really solid comparison, so I think he's going to go to 1 year prove-it type deal, and honestly, I think he stays with the Dodgers. So I've got him getting 1 year with the Dodgers at $15 million. And to round things out, at number 25, we've got Phillies reliever Carlos Estevez. Estevez has been something of a late bloomer. He's really broken out the last 2 years. In his 2024, in which he posted 26 saves and a whip around .9 between the Angels and Phillies, makes him arguably the best righty reliever available. And while the Phillies still could use him, they need the bullpen depth, they've actually hinted that they're not going to bring him back, and since I have them signing Tanner Scott, I've got the Phillies out. Now, Estevez would be useful to any number of competing teams, including the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Orioles, or the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks were a team that, if their bullpen is slightly better throughout this year, they're in the playoffs, and last year they snuck into the playoffs and went on a huge run. And so I think that's somewhere they're actually going to invest quite a bit of money. So I've got the Diamondbacks signing Carlos Estevez, and I've got them giving him 3 years and $36 million. And that's the list. That's the top 25. Let me know down in the comments what you think, who you think is going to sign where, there's anybody I left off the list, I do plan to react to this probably around opening day once all these guys have signed and see how many I get right. With the trade deadline predictions that I did, I think I only got 1, maybe 2 guys correct to the right team, so we'll see how well I do here. And I'll see y'all next time.